Ah, yes, more ideas from the Assassin's Handbook, I suppose. Be careful with that information. You can get in a lot of trouble with it. Timid people are destined for nothing better than timid jobs. You and I, Shaddam, have much more in our futures. Think of the possibilities. Hypothetically, of course. Besides, what's wrong with poison? It works nicely and affects only the targeted person, as required by the Great Convention. No collateral deaths, no loss of revenue, no destruction of inheritable property. Nice and neat. Poisons are for house-to-house assassinations, not for what you're talking about. You didn't complain when I took care of Fafnir. Huh? He'd be in his 60s now, still waiting to taste the throne. Do you want to wait that long? Stop, Shaddam insisted, digging in his heels. Don't even imagine such a course. This isn't right. And denying you your birthright is? How effective an emperor would you be if you couldn't exercise power until you were old and senile, like your father? Look what's happened on Arrakis. By the time we replaced Abelard Harkonnen, the damage to spice production was already done. Abelard had no idea how to crack the whip, so the workers didn't respect him. Now the Baron cracks it too much, and so morale is way down, leading to rampant defections and sabotage. But you can't really blame the Harkonnens. It all traces back to your father, the Padishah Emperor, and the bad decisions he's made. He continued more quietly. You owe it to the stability of the Imperium. Shaddam glanced up at the ceiling, as if searching for spy eyes or other listening devices, though he knew that Fenring kept his private penthouse impeccably shielded and regularly scanned. What kind of poison are you considering? Hypothetically speaking only. Again he stared across the lights of the city at the Imperial Palace. The shimmering structure seemed like a legendary grail, an unattainable prize. Perhaps something slow-acting? So Elrond will appear to be aging. No one will question what's happening, since he's so old already. Leave it to me. As our future emperor, you shouldn't concern yourself with the details of such matters. I have always been your expediter, remember? Shaddam chewed his lower lip. No one in the Imperium knew more about this man than he did. But could his friend ever turn on him? Possibly. Though Fenring knew full well his best path to power lay through Shaddam. How to keep this ambitious friend under control, how to stay a step ahead of him, that was the challenge. Emperor Elrond IX, aware of Hasimir Fenring's deadly skills, had made use of him in a number of clandestine operations, all of which had been successful. Elrond even suspected Fenring's role in Crown Prince Fafnir's death, but accepted it as part of imperial politics. Over the years, Fenring had murdered at least 50 men and a dozen women, some of whom had been his lovers, of either sex. He took a measure of pride in being a killer who could face the victim or strike behind his back without compunction. There were days Shaddam wished he and the pushy Fenring had never formed a boyhood relationship. Then he wouldn't be hemmed in with difficult choices that he didn't want to think about. Shaddam should have abandoned his crib companion as soon as he could walk. It was risky to be around such an unrelenting assassin, and at times he felt tainted by the association. Still, Fenring was his friend. There was an attraction between them, an undefinable something of which they'd spoken on occasion without fully understanding it. For the present, Shaddam found it easier to accept the friendship, and for his own sake he hoped it was friendship, instead of trying to sever it. That course of action could be extremely dangerous. Close beside him, Shaddam heard a voice that broke his train of thought. "Your favorite brandy, my prince?" Looking to one side, Shaddam saw Fenring offering him a large snifter of smoky-dark Kirana brandy. He accepted the snifter, but stared at the liquid suspiciously, swirling it around. Was there another color to it? Something not quite mixed in? He put his nose over the lip, inhaling the aroma as if he were a connoisseur, though he was actually trying to detect any foreign chemical. The brandy smelled normal. But then Fenring would have made sure of that. He was a subtle and devious man. "I can drag out the snooper if you like, but you never need worry about poison from me, Shaddam," Fenring said with a maddening smile. "Your father, however, is in an entirely different position." "Ah, yes, a slow-acting poison, you say? I suspect you already have a substance in mind. How long will my father live after you begin the process? If we do this at all, I mean." 2 years, maybe 3. Long enough to make his decline appear natural. Shaddam raised his chin, trying to look regal. His skin was perfumed, his reddish hair pomaded and slicked back. "You understand, I might only entertain such a treasonous idea for the sake of the Imperium, to avoid continued calamities at the hands of my father." A crafty smile worked at the edges of the weasel face. "Of course." 2 or 3 years, Shaddam mused. "Time for me to prepare for the great responsibilities of leadership, I suppose, while you attend to some of the more unpleasant tasks of empire. Aren't you going to drink your brandy, Shaddam?" Shaddam met the hard gaze of the oversized eyes, and felt fear course along his spine. He was in too deep not to trust Fenring now. He drew another shaky breath, and sipped the rich liqueur. 3 days later, Fenring slipped like a ghost through the shields and poison snoopers of the palace, and stood over the sleeping emperor, listening to the smooth purr of his snores. Not a care in the universe, this one. No one else could have gotten into the most secure sleeping chamber of the ancient emperor. But Fenring had his ways. A bribe here, a manipulated schedule there, a concubine made ill, a doorman distracted, the chamberlain sent off on an urgent errand. He had done this many times before, practicing for the inevitable. Everyone in the palace was used to Fenring slinking around, and they knew better than to ask too many questions. Now, according to his precise assessment, which would have made even a mentat proud, Fenring had 3 minutes, 4 if he was lucky. Enough time to change the course of history. With the same perfect timing he had demonstrated during the shield ball game, as well as during his rehearsals on mannequins and 2 unfortunate serving women from the kitchen storehouses, Fenring froze in place and waited, gauging the breathing of his victim like a Lhasa tiger about to pounce. In one hand he cradled a long micro-hair needle between 2 slender fingers, while in the other he held a mist tube. Old Elrud lay on his back, in the precisely correct position, looking like a mummy, his parchment skin stretched tight over his skull. Guided by a certain hand, the mist tube moved closer. Fenring counted to himself, waiting. In a space between Elrud's breaths, Fenring squeezed a lever on the tube and sprayed a powerful anesthetic mist in the old man's face. There was no discernible change in Elrud, but Fenring knew the nerve deadener had taken effect instantaneously. Now he made his thrust. A fiber-fine, self-guiding needle snaked up the old man's nose, through sinus cavities, and into the frontal lobe of his brain. Fenring paused no more than an instant to dispense the chemical time bomb, then withdrew. A few seconds, and it was done, without any evidence or even any pain. Undetectable and multi-layered, the internal machinery had been set in motion. The tiny catalyst would grow and do its damage, like the first rotten cell in an apple. Each time the Emperor consumed his favorite beverage, spice beer, his own brain would release tiny doses of catalyst. Thus, an ordinary component of the old man's diet would be chemically converted into chamerky, poison administered in a drink. His mind would gradually rot away, a metamorphosis that would be most enjoyable to watch. Fenring loved to be subtle. Kwisatz Haderach, shortening of the way. This is the label applied by the Bene Gesserit to the unknown for which they sought a genetic solution. A male Bene Gesserit whose organic mental powers would bridge space and time. Terminology of the Imperium. It was another cold morning. The small blue-white sun, Laujin, peeked over terracotta-tiled rooftops, dissipating the rain. Reverend Mother Anirul Sado Tonkin held the collar of her black robe shut against the moisture-laden wind that whipped up from the south and dampened her short bronze-brown hair. Her hurried footsteps carried her across the wet cobblestones, straight toward the arched doorway of the Bene Gesserit administration building. She was late and ran, even though it was unseemly for a woman of her status to be seen rushing about like a red-faced schoolgirl. Mother Superior and her selected council would be waiting in the chapter chamber for a meeting that could not begin without Anirul. Only she had the sisterhood's complete breeding projections and the full knowledge from other memory in her head. The sprawling Mother School complex on Wallach 9 was the base of Bene Gesserit operations throughout the Imperium. The historic first sanctuary of the sisterhood had been erected here, dating from post-Butlerian jihad days at the beginnings of the great schools of the human mind. Some of the buildings in the training enclave were thousands of years old, and echoed with ghosts and memories. Others had been constructed in more recent centuries, with styles carefully designed to match the originals. The bucolic appearance of the Mother School complex fostered one of the primary precepts of the sisterhood: minimal appearance, maximum content. Anirul's own features were long and narrow, giving her a doe-like face, but her large eyes had a depth of millennia in them. The half-timbered stucco and wood structures, a combination of classical architectural styles, had moss-streaked sienna roof tiles and beveled loom enhancement windows designed to concentrate natural light and warmth from the tiny sun. The simple, narrow streets and alleys, in tandem with the quaintly archaic appearance of the instructional enclave, belied the subtle complexities and sheer weight of history taught inside. Haughty visitors would not be impressed, and the sisterhood did not care a whit. Throughout the Imperium, the Bene Gesserit kept a low profile, but they were always to be found in vital areas, tilting the political equilibrium at crux points, watching, nudging, achieving their own aims. It was best when others underestimated them. The sisters encountered fewer obstacles that way. With all of its superficial deficiencies and difficulties, Wallach 9 remained the perfect place to develop the psychic muscles required of Reverend Mothers. The planet's intricate hive of structures and workers was too valuable, too steeped in history and tradition to be replaced. Yes, there were warmer climates on more hospitable worlds, but any acolyte who could not endure these conditions had no place among the agonies, harsh environments, and often painful decisions a true Bene Gesserit would face. Keeping her quick breaths under control,